Kingdom Hearts is a franchise infamous for its confusing, overcomplicated story and lore, but I think this is highly exaggerated and mostly the result of three things. 1. The inevitable buildup of things to keep track of the longer any fantastical series goes on that nevertheless makes enough sense to those who have been keeping up with it. 2. The increasing tendency of people to experience art purely secondhand through wikis, summaries, and YouTube videos instead of interacting with the art directly and personally. And 3. The fact that Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance did actually make things quite a bit messier. But the reputation had already been established by then, so you can't pin all the blame on Xehanort's time travel and Nording and Dream Worlds as much as I might want to. And besides, I don't think the problem is actually that Dream Drop gets more confusing, and more that it messes with the stakes and consequences of the series up to that point, which is a more fundamental problem unrelated to how easy or hard it is to follow along. So I pin the blame for the reputation more on factors external to the Kingdom Hearts games themselves. Kingdom Hearts 2 was the first RPG of any kind I ever played all the way through. I remember first hearing about it from two of my friends in elementary school raving about how cool it was, and then one of them showed me the strategy guide when I went over to his house. I then noticed the manga offered in those Scholastic Book Fair catalogs. Is that even a thing anymore? Anyway, I bought the manga book in that catalog, which cover the first 2/3 of the Roxas prologue, and I knew I had to play this game. So, I got Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, and I played the first game up to arriving in Traverse Town before I got bored and switched to the one I really wanted to play. To this day, I still have not played the first game all the way through. A few years after my first attempt, I tried again and got up to Hollow Bastion, and then just watched the rest of the cutscenes. Sorry to KH-1 fans. But this will be relevant to the larger point of this video. Much of my time on the early internet was watching Kingdom Hearts content and reading through wikis and forums, feeling like some sort of deep scholar as I read accounts of what happened in the games I hadn't played and in the scenes from the then Japan exclusive final mixes, and obsessed over forum analyses of 2's secret ending, which would later turn out to be a teaser for Birth by Sleep. And I remember how different it felt finally watching the rest of the Kingdom Hearts 1 cutscenes, or those of the Chain of Memories remake. For one thing, it felt a lot less confusing than the wikis and forums had been. Consider the differences between how wikis lay out information and how the actual games present the same information, and how the story can ground the journey in the characters' emotional arcs while wikis do not. A little while ago, Yahtzee Croshaw did a gimmick video for Second Wind reading Sora's wiki entry, and he was immediately sidetracked by the upfront presentation of info from Birth by Sleep that required him to open up the cans of worms that are Ventus and Vanitas. Meanwhile, you play the game starting with Kingdom Hearts 1, and you get actual scenes characterizing Sora and establishing his relationships with Kairi and Riku. By the end of the prologue, you have a firm understanding of Sora as a young, adventurous boy who wants to be with his friends and will fight darkness to save them. Whatever new terms and eventually weird magic the game throws at you after that, this fundamental aspect of Sora's character is a constant truth that remains simple. Kingdom Hearts, the whole series, is fundamentally about the value of friendship, how it can bridge great distances, both physical and emotional, ease the passage into maturity, and be a shield against despair. Everything else is effectively window dressing around that core idea and the main characters who convey it. It's true that there's a lot of weird magic rules that don't conform at all to how real life works. If you try to apply the logic of real medical hearts to the game's magical metaphorical hearts, you would get confused, but hey, it's fantasy magic, so that one's kind of on you. The emotional stakes and goals of Sora, Roxas, Riku, and the Wayfinder trio are all completely clear throughout the series, even if the plans of their enemies are shrouded in mystery. And that clarity can anchor a player through every new detail of lore or backstory. And in the series' heyday, the new lore was always added at a steady stream that allows a player to sit with each new major concept rather than get overwhelmed. And in some cases, like the most potentially confusing parts of Kingdom Hearts 2, the games sit you down and explain the same idea multiple times. Most of the concepts before Dream Drop weren't that complicated anyway. Heartless are introduced as simple monsters first, with explanations and complications in the differences between Emblem and Pureblood Heartless coming later and not actually being that important. The fact that people falling to darkness and becoming heartless can also produce a nobody is not brought up until the second game, after the baseline understanding of what heartless are has been well and truly established. If you ask a Kingdom Hearts fan to explain the lore and you get heartless and nobody thrown at you and defined within a sentence or two, you're a lot less likely to retain what those creatures are. And you might get an inaccurate sense that understanding the emblem pureblood distinction is important to understanding the story, when it's really just a fun extra detail. Yes, there are a lot of characters and concepts that the series has built up over time, and boiling the experience down to those details to present them all at once makes you sound insane. But is that really so different from asking an MCU fan to explain the plot of the Infinity Saga to someone who hasn't seen any of it and expecting them to follow along? Note I said the Infinity Saga, the first 3 phases that everyone treats as the Golden Age now, the part before oversaturation finally set in. Getting introduced to Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye over the course of the Phase 1 movies building up to the Avengers is quite different from getting a crash course explanation from a wiki or a fan. Kingdom Hearts is the same way. That's not to say there isn't clunky writing or a wealth of strange story choices throughout the series, but I don't think these moments are confusing or hard to follow, just unnecessary or dumb. I suppose in that sense convoluted might still be a fair word to use because certain things are more complicated than they strictly need to be to tell the same story, but hardly too complicated to follow. Like, okay, the Heartless are actually the hearts of people outside of their bodies, and the Nobodies are actually the bodies of people without their hearts, so the names are the opposite of what they logically should be. Weird, counterintuitive, and ultimately irrelevant. Once a fine jumping off point for amusing jokes, and now just tired observations and never points that a player of one of the games couldn't easily shrug off after realizing it. Similarly, the reveal that consider this a blanket spoiler warning for Kingdom Hearts 1 through Dream Drop Distance, if you care. Thanks. So yeah, consider the reveal that the Ansem fought in Kingdom Hearts 1 was actually the heartless form of a young man named Xehanort, who overthrew the real Ansem and stole his name. I get that from the outside looking in, hearing the name Ansem for the first time in the context of this is Ansem but he isn't really Ansem but he's still called Ansem even after everyone finds out he isn't the real Ansem is confusing and stupid. But when playing the game, there's a whole back and forth where Mickey Mouse sits Sora down and explains it unambiguously. This guy assumed this other guy's name. Okay, fine. Simple. It's a common story trope. All plot twists involve changing a character or situation from what it is first presented as, and describing the twist by presenting the before and after scenarios at the same time is always going to create at least some form of whiplash. The twist can feel unnecessary since the story of Xehanort's betrayal of Ansem the Wise could easily be told without it, but it is there. So does it add anything meaningful? Well, its presence subtly characterizes Xehanort as ambitious but insecure, trying to style himself as a scientist king like his mentor without feeling that he can actually stand on his own name and achievements. There may also be motivation from his amnesia, as by assuming Ansem's name he can adopt the past of another as his own to fill the void that is his history. It's not characterization that matches up with who the character ends up being by the end of Dream Drop Distance, and I think the developments from that game change the character for the worse, but again, I would not use the word confusing to make this criticism. Once upon a time, it was fair to call the series hard to follow in a non-textual sense, because all the handheld games are just as important to the plot as the numbered entries, except maybe coded, but were on different consoles, making playing each installment prohibitively expensive for people who couldn't buy every platform, ensuring that if someone only played the numbered entries, they would be hopelessly lost. I suspect this multi-platform decision is responsible for a huge increase in Kingdom Hearts fans turning to wikis and forums to get the full story, thus exacerbating the degree to which the series became defined by wiki confusion and second-hand content consumption. For people first approaching the series after 2012, though, the remaster collections almost completely nullify this problem. That's right, old school fans, the remix compilations are about 13 years old. The games can all be experienced on one platform now, listed mostly in release order, which is always the correct order to experience any series for the first time, in case that even needed to be said, so don't watch the Days cutscenes before KH2. I'm not sure why the 2.8 Prologue collection on Steam is $10 more than the 1.5 plus 2.5 Remix collection, despite being half as many entries and only one of those entries being a full game, but again, not a matter of the text itself. Thinking about the peak of the series, which and I think most others would define as the games in the Remix collection, Kingdom Hearts 1 through Birth by Sleep, there is only one plot point I can think of that isn't clearly explained within the games themselves and does provoke confusion, which is why Vanitas looks like Sora. I think the explanation is that because he was split from Ven, who had already connected with the heart of baby Sora years earlier, Vanitas is somehow resonating with the future form of this other heart his other self is connected to. Of everything in this series pre-Dream Drop, this is the one bit that seems excessively convoluted to the point of causing a problem, instead of naturally evolving out of character dynamics and decisions and a logically expanding cosmology. It seems like a result of the desire for the evil Sora visual without really caring about why such a character would exist. It also doesn't end up having much bearing on the plot, being more for the audience than the characters. But maybe I'm missing something, so let me know in the comments if you have a reading on the thematic significance of Vanitas looking like Sora 10 years before Sora looks like Sora. There are other things that might get called confusing that I think aren't hard to actually follow or understand, but are simply unnecessary. The story of Ventus could have been exactly the same without him looking like Roxas, and nothing of consequence would change, just one line from Xigbar in 358 Days Over 2, and Axel joking about it in 3. But at least the causality of Ventus's heart took refuge within Sora's, and so Roxas looks like him, is consistent with how, time works, as opposed to Vanitas taking on the appearance of Sora's future self. Sure, Ven looking like Roxas is yet another example of a detail that an outsider is going to rightfully be baffled by, out of context, but in context, it's not hard to wrap your head around, it's just silly. The exact metaphysics of how Nominate exists don't fully line up with what we know about how Nobody's work, but she's hand-waved as a special case because Kairi is a princess of heart, and the important thing is her personal journey and chain of memories in 2 anyway, not the precise mechanics of how she came to be. Riku regaining his own form after Ansem's machine explodes in KH2 is waved away as Ansem the Wise said anything could happen when he blew up and no other explanation is given. And sure, that's a cop-out, but also unimportant when considering the symbolic meaning of Riku no longer running away from his friends and being fully forgiven for his actions from the first game, and Ansem the Wise finally taking responsibility for how his desire for revenge hurt Riku, being immediately followed by Riku getting his own body back. A lot of other things from the pre-Dream Drop era that were called confusing at the time were really just mysteries whose answers hadn't been revealed yet, which hardly seems fair. Going back to the hyper-mainstream MCU of the 2010s, general audiences were able to get on board with a long-running series adding on character after character and concept after concept by just taking things as they came and grounding themselves in the familiar characters. The later phases only got hard to follow if you stopped keeping up with the main parts of it, which is a perfectly fair and understandable decision, or tried to jump into a late entry without any context, which is not. There are so many characters with their own stories to keep track of and relationships to remember, and wiki-diving the MCU to prepare for, say, Infinity War and Endgame would have just been overwhelming, but enough people watched the movies through as intended to remember enough to make Endgame the apocalyptic box office smash hit that it was. And because the MCU during this decade wasn't actually following any plan beyond the very loose, let's build up to Thanos by making our random artifacts of power the Infinity Stones in otherwise unrelated movies, which itself wasn't even considered until making the first Avengers, we get continuity errors and things that don't line up all over the place. Like, why would Thanos give away the Mind Stone to a lackey he doesn't know or trust and then send that guy after the Space Stone? Seems pretty obvious Loki's scepter was not originally meant to have the Mind Stone in it. And for that matter, I doubt the Tesseract was supposed to have the Space Stone in it the whole time either, since in the comics the Cosmic Cube is a different artifact altogether. And then there's the snare of the Infinity Gauntlet being in Asgard's vault, but also in Thanos' vault, so then the Asgard one was called a fake, but then also I guess the real one wasn't created until right before Infinity War, even though Thanos had it in Age of Ultron, since when Peter Dinklage asks why Asgard didn't protect the dwarves from Thanos forcing them to make the gauntlet, Thor talks talks about Asgard's destruction, which happened in Thor Ragnarok, which was after Age of Ultron, so something isn't adding up, but also it doesn't matter, because this is an incidental nitpick that doesn't affect any of the characters' personal journeys, or the emotional stakes, or the themes of the films, and general audiences just rolled with it, because all the other stuff is what matters, and that's what Kingdom Hearts was able to consistently deliver on in its golden age. It is not until Dream Drop Distance that Kingdom Hearts' narrative actually starts to fall apart, in my view. This correlates with the introduction of dream worlds and time travel and the early mentions of the power of waking, and I do feel like those begin to make the story convoluted in a more meaningful and substantial way. It doesn't help that this is the second version of time travel introduced in the series, and it works completely differently to the first. But my main criticism is less the convolution and more how those things, especially the time travel, mess with emotional arcs and stakes. Because Xehanort's time travel is not introduced to start changing the timeline at all and force the audience to remember multiple versions of events, which is usually why time travel makes things confusing. In fact, its rules explicitly prevent changes from occurring, since those who are doing the time traveling will not remember anything after returning to their own time. The purpose of the time travel is functionally an excuse to bring back old characters whose roles in the story were over already, or at least those characters whose roles were over and didn't get brought back anyway because of the killing a Heartless and a nobody brings the original back rule. It's an unnecessarily roundabout way to bring dead characters back, so it is convoluted, but also is deceptively simple in its narrative function. It's just resurrection with extra steps. The actual issue is that suddenly Kingdom Hearts falls into the comic book problem of death being impermanent, tragedy always coming with an asterisk and expiration date, and the stakes of the conflict feeling hollow as a result. While characters like Lee and Ienzo and others get full redemptions post-resurrections by the end of Kingdom Hearts 3, it feels like it retroactively cheapens the events of Chain of Memories and Kingdom Hearts 2 to just have the entire organization come back, but half of them are good now and also barely have anything to do. And this dovetails with the reveal that the whole thing was part of Master Xehanort's plan all along. The story of Xehanort before Dream Drop Distance came out seemed to be this. An old Keyblade master obsessed with darkness and prolonging his life for the sake of more darkness experiments chose to groom Terra into being a prime vessel for possession, so he could double his lifespan in a younger body, only for Terra fighting from within and Aqua defeating him in battle to wipe his memories and create the brand new persona, Apprentice Xehanort. He became a broken man with an aching loneliness, grasping at the fragments of Master Xehanort's old ambitions mixed with bits of memories of Terra's friends, and ended up sundering himself to further his efforts to fill the void within himself. He betrayed the man who'd taken him in and cared for him, partly out of Master Xehanort's extreme lack of research ethics, and partly out of Terra's issues with father figures and inadequacy being in someone else's shadow. He then manipulated his fellow apprentices into their heartless experiments, and as Xemnas he used and betrayed them further in Organization 13, becoming a foil to Sora by rejecting true friendship in favor of gathering followers. He deceives them to regain the heart he cast aside to his ambitions in the first place, ending up lonelier than ever while chatting to Aqua's empty armor in secret. He's a tragic villain, driven to evil by his own flaws and choices, but also the circumstances of his creation he could not control, so he is still pitiable.
Xemnas, there's more to a heart than just anger or hate. It's full of all kinds of feelings. Don't you remember?
Unfortunately, I don't.
While his loneliness as Ansem and Xemnas is continued in Kingdom Hearts 3, the power of that narrative I just laid out is significantly undercut when it turns out in Dream Drop Distance that he was still working according to Master Xehanort's plans the entire time. It's uncertain how much of those plans Ansem and Xemnas were consciously aware of in their own times.
Do you remember now, or... wait... did you never lose your memory?
But regardless, my point is that before it, their actions and motivations came across as organic and reactive to changing circumstances. But from Dream Drop on, they feel less dynamic and personally motivated, and so less interesting. Apprentice Xehanort is effectively not even a character anymore, just a rest stop between Master Xehanort and the split into Ansem and Xemnas. Dream Drop's reveals about how all the previous games were according to Xehanort's grand plan in some way shifts the story in a negative way, at least according to my preferences. Master Xehanort as a villain acquires Jigsaw-esque absurd omniscience, which makes the struggles of the series' best games matter a lot less. That's not entirely fair. You could point to certain things that have set him back in minor ways, but that is the main impression we get. And when the stakes reach a point where it feels like the villain is too powerful, we run into the White Walker problem, or the Mass Effect Reaper problem, where the villain is so omnipotent there's no way to make the hero's victory feel earned and satisfying. Master Xehanort isn't nearly as bad about this as the White Walkers and the Reapers, but it's the same core issue. So the combination of dead characters coming back for various reasons and the main villain suddenly having planned everything out undermines the stakes and makes everything feel like it doesn't matter. This is the problem with Dream Drop Distance that naturally carries through into Kingdom Hearts 3, and at no point am I expressing confusion about the lore or the story. It's all clear to me, I just don't like it. I mentioned the sleeping worlds and the power of waking, and sure, those I don't understand, and my lack of understanding of the latter becomes a problem when it gets extremely critical to the climax of Kingdom Hearts 3. But after alluding to how perceptions of these games as confusing is exaggerated by those who haven't played them and those who have filtered their experiences of the story through second-hand content like YouTube explainers and wikis and the like, I have a confession to make. I have never played Dream Drop Distance or Kingdom Hearts 3, or Coded or Melody of Memory, and I also never got very far in the Game Boy chain of memories, but that all seems less significant. If a fan of Dream Drop or 3 wants to say that the power of waking does have a clear explanation and I just forgot about it because watching the games as cutscenes made them less memorable to me, then that would be on me, not on Kingdom Hearts. Can such second-hand content ever meaningfully replicate a hands-on, direct experience with a work of art? And to be clear, for the purposes of this video, I'm using the term second-hand content to refer to content made by others about a core text. I'm not using second-hand to mean hand-me-down, like buying a used game, because if you do that, you're still playing the game yourself. I'm using first-hand and second-hand in an experiential context, not a purchasing context. But anyway, I struggled with this question when making my critique of Raid Shadow Legends because I knew I was not going to actually download and play it, gross, but I also wanted to be fair as possible to its narrative for the purposes of my analysis. So I made sure that said narrative was, in fact, separate from its gameplay, entirely in those slideshow cutscenes and not told through the auto-battler gameplay. And I made sure to watch those cutscenes myself, not read a wiki article about what happened in that campaign. As it turned out, the campaign itself had the same level of depth as a wiki article, it just had more stylish prose. But that was something I discovered through my direct engagement with the cutscenes. And I was able to analyze that shallowness as part of the text, which I could not have done limited to a wiki. If I felt I couldn't have had an equal experience with the narrative through this method, I would not have made the video at all. Even so, I risked missing out on something that I never learned was there. Raid was a bit of an extreme example, but that's also how I enjoy the narratives of Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance and 3 and part of Union Cross until I stopped watching, because oh no, this story compilation is so long. Anyway, the point is I watched the cutscenes because I never owned a 3DS or a PS4, and I didn't want to get into a gacha game and didn't expect any of these games to come to PC, and I was confident that the cutscene-driven storytelling styles of all these games would allow me to authentically experience their narratives as YouTube cutscene compilations. But I would never claim to have authentically experienced the games in their entireties. I can't weigh in on the gameplay, and that also limits my ability to honestly evaluate how the stories are paced, since I'm skipping over all the narrative downtime the gameplay provides. Such downtime adds more of a breather between story beats to digest any complicated ideas, so a cutscene compilation skipping over that may potentially run into a lesser version of the wiki dive problem where concepts are introduced too quickly. Compilations sometimes include gameplay bits if story relevant, like non-cutscene dialogues or bits of boss fights, but rarely things like the reports. Funnily enough, Kingdom Hearts' own official releases demonstrate the limitations of a cutscene-only approach. The DS game 358 Days Over 2 was not remade for the Remix collections in the vein of Chain of Memories. It was instead turned into a compilation of remade cutscenes with occasional text screens summarizing bits of gameplay. And many fans of the original release found that experiencing the story in this indirect way robs some of it of its power.
I watched the cutscene collection before I went back and played Days again for a review, and what I found is that the cutscene collection didn't affect me in nearly the same way playing the game did. Sure, it was sad, a lot of sad things were happening on screen, but I didn't cry like I did at the end of the actual game. I wasn't shaken when Axel screamed, "What's your problem?" Because I hadn't just spent 17 hours trying to keep this broken trio together, trying to stop the train from veering off the tracks, trying to hold on to the good.
For some, though, the cutscene compilation was a worthy enough replacement, and at the very least watching it for yourself instead of reading a summary of it gives you a direct engagement with the story moments. So does watching cutscene compilations for other games that cleanly split their gameplay and narrative, like Last of Us 1, or Sony's Marvel's Spider-Man, or, I don't know, Injustice 2. But there are a lot of games this doesn't work for. Games that use their mechanics in narrative ways, or games that are divergently reactive to player choice like most Western RPGs. When the game's story isn't driven by cutscenes and is instead built to incorporate gaming's interactivity into its events, the feasibility of watching a playthrough as a replacement dramatically diminishes. You can assemble the moments of discovery from Outer Wilds or Paradise Killer into some sort of story compilation, but way less of the intended player experience is properly translated, so such videos are far more limited in conveying an authentic, vicarious experience. Player choice cannot be accounted for in a YouTube video someone else uploaded. Sure, there are accounts like Video Game Sophistry. These creators will archive every single possible choice from an RPG, allowing you to take a look at what happens in roads not traveled in your own playthroughs to satisfy idle curiosity or comprehensive understanding without needing to replay a 100-hour game. I suppose someone could assemble all the Video Game Sophistry videos for Baldur's Gate 3 into some sort of choose-your-own-adventure web of playlists, but that strikes me as way more unwieldy than just playing the game yourself. With all of that said, this form of secondhand content is at least an attempt to engage with the material directly. Maybe you don't own consoles to play a console-exclusive game, or you just can't afford to play the latest installment of your favorite series, or the story interests you but the gameplay sucks like, allegedly, Drakengard. But you still want to experience as much as you can. The barrier of vicariousness is thinned as much as possible, even if it cannot be dissolved. But sometimes there's a thicker barrier, like in a Let's Play or live stream. And to be clear, I have nothing against Let's Players or live streamers as a category, and I have nothing against people using Let's Plays and streams of games they've never played to inform their impressions of the game. But I do have a problem with people doing this and then claiming expertise over these games, because when watching this type of secondhand content, even when paying attention to the game and watching through the whole thing, you are absorbing someone else's impressions in real time alongside the core text, and that inherently influences your own interpretation, especially if the person you're watching is someone you've already developed a positive parasocial relationship with. You're likely to conform to their view of what you're watching them go through. Part of this is, I think, a subconscious recognition that your engagement with the text is less authentic than theirs because they're actually playing the game and you're not. And of course, part of this is the difference you're likely to give to someone you already like and have respect for, even if you know intellectually your tastes don't perfectly align. So if you're watching a streamer have a bad time with a game you've never played, you're likely to internalize the idea that the game is bad. It requires attention and skepticism to actually focus on the game and resist the imposed opinion of the streamer and form your own. If you're a regular viewer of this type of content, how often do you find yourself disagreeing with the reaction your favorite streamer has to a game you haven't already formed your own thoughts on? It's probably a safe assumption that this sort of active critical viewing is not what most of any given streaming audience is interested in. That's fair enough for the viewers. I just hope they would recognize this and be fair to the games. Some don't. Some of those who don't actively don't want to, but for the sake of my own sanity, I'm going to make the naive choice to spend the rest of this video acting as if everyone wants to engage with art in good faith. A person whose first time with Kingdom Hearts 3 is playing it for themselves is going to develop a different conclusion than they would if their first time is watching a streamer get super invested and excited about it, which is going to be different than if it's watching a streamer get disappointed, confused, or even infuriated by it. Again, I know games are expensive and getting more expensive, and time is limited and getting more limited, and I don't expect people to play every single game just to earn the right to have an opinion on it. Despite what some viewers thought I was saying with my cheeky Marcus Aurelius joke at the start of my Veilguard video, I think it's fine to use secondhand content to inform your purchasing decisions and to decide some games aren't for you, or just to enjoy hearing someone else's thoughts about a work you otherwise have no interest in. I simply want people to have self-awareness about how their opinions are formed, and to not acquire feelings of genuine hatred and anger towards a work of art through osmosis. This can be even more troublesome if you try to replace direct experience with something even more filtered, like a video essay. I think video essays are great. I'd better since I've been making them, but essays focused on analyzing specific media have the most value as supplements to the relevant media, not substitutes. After all, they are structured to convey the essayist's perspective on whatever aspects of the work they deem relevant. This is good essay writing. Essays should be focused on what is relevant to their topics, and this also makes an essay an inherently poor replacement for playing a game firsthand. The very nature of a good media analysis or critique essay will make it incapable of giving an unfamiliar viewer a complete picture of its subject matter. Even a comprehensive let's talk about everything style critique is going to be cut down and filtered based on what parts of everything the essayist finds the most interesting. There is another thing I've been thinking about after my raid video, since I made it assuming that its viewers would be using it as a substitute for playing the game to understand the story. On the one hand, who cares? It's Raid Shadow Legends. Its story content is sparse anyway, and a single account can only even see the cutscenes once, and it's an exploitative gambling game. Don't play it. On the other hand, once one starts making value judgments about what art is worth such genuine consideration and what is not, I expect people will draw the line leaving worthy art on the wrong side of it. I got a lot of angry Veilguard haters in the comments of my lukewarm "this game is flawed but it's fine" video because anything less than total condemnation is heresy to some of them. And I'm sure they would say Veilguard is as undeserving of earnest direct engagement as I would judge Raid Shadow Legends to be. I harp on this because I have been guilty of it earlier in my life. I, for example, uncritically accepted that Final Fantasy X was bad because Spoonie said so way back when, and I have an embarrassing memory of quoting his points at someone who had played the game to try to convince them that their enjoyment of it was somehow wrong. That was pretty awful of me. I was a kid then, so I was especially impressionable and insecure in my own beliefs and opinions, but even as an adult, I've found myself assuming greater expertise about some games I haven't played just because I've absorbed second-hand videos about them. I've seen several analyses of Yick that approach the game from different perspectives, and I've developed an opinion based on those videos about what Yick's themes are and how well it engages with them. I have a more complete view of Yick than I would if I'd only watched one of the videos, but I now realize all my opinions on the game must be caveated and I should avoid acting like an expert. I don't really know Metal Gear Solid 4, I know Steak Bentley's take. I don't know the Final Destination films, I know the Morbid Zoo's take. I still love deep dive video essays and analyses about things I haven't experienced and intend to keep enjoying them, and you should too. I just want to be better about recognizing the limitations of the knowledge I can glean from such videos. And the secondhand content I've described so far is a valuable part of building a community around works of art, fostering discussion and debate which keeps the art alive among the fans. Essays, reviews, let's plays, and live streams are all included in that. But then there's the worst end of the secondhand spectrum, the rage bait commentary videos that often come from people who haven't played a video game, reading aloud tweets from other people who haven't played the game, summarizing an article on a fringe website full of lies written by someone else who hasn't played the game, and somehow that makes fans of these videos treat them as telling them everything they need to know about that game. Anyone who gets their primary impressions of any piece of media from these types of videos probably knows less about that media than someone who's never even heard about it. It's probably more accurate to call these sorts of videos fifth-hand experience, and I won't go to bat for them. There's been reporting recently that young people aren't buying games anymore. Now, the original Cicana chart lumps all video game spending together. It doesn't break down which elements of gaming are being cut back on. There's full price purchases, sale price purchases, AAA $60 to $80 games versus indie $5 to $25 games, free-to-play games, and microtransactions to account for. If someone switches from playing one $60 game per year to playing 4 $5 and 3 free games per year, that's still a huge reduction in that person's spending, even if they're playing way more games. So this report is limited, and we can't definitively know too many specifics about which parts of gaming middle-era Gen Z is cutting back on, but it's probably fair to assume that with the proliferation of online content about games that can be accessed for free on YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, and so on, more and more people are resorting to secondhand means to experience video games. Similarly, with movie theater ticket sales becoming more expensive and TV shows being locked behind different streaming services that are increasing their prices and cracking down on password sharing, the first-hand accessibility of media seems to be diminishing across the board. So, once again, turning to online commentary becomes the most convenient way to experience, say, the latest Star Wars show if you can't justify paying for Disney+. I bet this realm of online commentary is very reasonable and accurately represents the media being discussed and is not being hijacked by bad faith actors who care more about rage clicks than earnest engagement and honestly representing the works they're discussing. Oh no. Again, because I know if I don't repeat this enough, I'll get comments misunderstanding my intention, I want to stress that secondhand text is good and fun and valuable. It can expand your appreciation or critique of art you've experienced, like how the OSP detailed diatribe on Arcane Season 2 helps me clarify my own thoughts and appreciate what it's doing much more than a lot of other people apparently did. Such work can also be a way to gauge what media you think will be worth spending your limited time and money on, but it is the latter that is especially vulnerable to misrepresentation. At the risk of overgeneralizing the views of the vocal few in online spaces, we need to be less willing to assume the hyperbolic as being true and then acting as if secondhand content can make us experts on a work of art, and more comfortable saying, this doesn't look like it's for me, so I won't bother and I won't impose my impression of it onto those who have actually experienced it. Videos of people explaining and poking fun at Kingdom Hearts are fun, as are comedic videos of people explaining other detail-heavy stories like Animorphs and Bionicle. For those who have experienced the core text, these can be fun reminders of what happened and provide shared laughs about certain silly elements. For those who have not, such videos can pique their curiosity and encourage them to actually play the game or read the book or what have you. Laying out a bunch of crazy plot points from a distance and laughing at how wild they sound out of context can be fun. We just shouldn't let them overtake the direct experience. Kingdom Hearts is so confusing haha is overdone, a cheap shot that bypasses more substantial criticisms you can make. Nevertheless, it remains popular because it's easier to make that level of critique when you haven't played the games and don't know their actual strengths and weaknesses. That criticism seems to have become more valid for Kingdom Hearts as the Union Cross mobile game and its spin-offs have become more important to the main narrative. There's a lot of stuff I've heard about that part of the franchise regarding how it handles the Disney worlds and a realm of fiction that sounds really messy, and there's also stuff I've heard of that I don't like on a conceptual level because it hits my pet peeve of giving certain side characters unnecessary narrative weight and bloating their backstories, making characters we already know even more extra important even though that just makes the world feel smaller and makes them feel less like real people. But I don't feel qualified to speak on this with any actual authority since I haven't watched all the story cutscenes from Union Cross and Dark Road. As far as I know, the execution of these ideas I usually dislike is cool this time. What good would it do me or you or Kingdom Hearts to write it off completely here? I want to finish with one other problem born out of experience through wiki instead of experience through experience. There's been a great lack in a lot of online media discourse that has been going on for as long as I've been aware of it. A hyperfixation on the facts of a story at the expense of all else. I've spoken about the term for the literal events of a work's plot as they happen in-universe in a video before. Comment that term if you know it. But anyway, this hyperfixation on facts can lead to an unwarranted elevation of more incidental parts of a work of art. Sure, having a baseline understanding of what happens in a story is important, but that's just the first step of engaging with it, assuming that the understanding is accurate in the first place. I want you to think of your favorite scene from your favorite movie. Why do you like it? Now, summarize that scene as if you were writing it into a wiki page. How much of what you like about it can be captured by that summary? One of my favorite scenes from Kingdom Hearts is the very end of the Roxas prologue from Kingdom Hearts 2. Here is the description of the scene from Roxas's character page on the Kingdom Hearts wiki. Roxas then enters the pod room where Sora is kept, but not before seeing Donald Duck and Goofy slumbering in their own pods. Diz is there to greet him, revealing his intentions and fueling Roxas's rage with cutting remarks about Roxas's purpose and nature. In a blind rage, Roxas tries to cut down Diz, but sees that this Diz is only a hologram. Even after this, Roxas continues to attack Diz. Diz vanishes, and the pod in the center of the room opens. Roxas's anger drains away when he sees Sora slumbering in the pod. Sadly smiling, he says to Sora, "You're lucky. Looks like my summer vacation is over." With those words, Roxas respectfully accepts his fate and rejoins with his original self. That was almost entirely clinical and flat, a play-by-play of the things that happen in the scene and one quote and nothing more. Now here's the scene in its entirety. Unless YouTube gets weird about me playing the whole thing, but I don't know why it would since it's video game footage and copyright should be cool with that, but whatever.
At last, the Keyblade's chosen one.
Who are you talking to? Me? Or Sora?
To half of Sora, of course. You reside in darkness. What I need is someone who can move about the realm of light and destroy Organization 13.
Why? Who are you?
I am a servant of the world. And if I'm a servant, then you should consider yourself a tool at best.
Was that supposed to be a joke? 'Cause I'm not laughing!
My apologies. This is only a data-based projection. Come, over here.
I hate you so much.
You should share some of that hatred with Sora. He's far too nice for his own good.
No! My heart belongs to me! Sora. You're lucky. Looks like my summer vacation is over.
There are things that you can pick at to criticize this scene if you want to, like maybe you don't like Jesse McCartney's delivery of some of the lines. Though this is one of the scenes where the actors having to adopt weird cadences to match lip flaps isn't as much of a problem as elsewhere in the games. Or maybe you're bumped by the weird fade to black in the middle of the scene that I assume exists because the game is needing to load between two different scenes stitched together for memory reasons. And if you have no context, Roxas's summer vacation line probably falls flat. But even if the scene doesn't work for you as it does for me, surely you'd agree at the very least that watching it, hearing the music and the dialogue and seeing the animation is so much more powerful than reading or hearing read that wiki description. And were Kingdom Hearts a purely prose novel, it would hopefully be written in a more dramatized and lyrical style than a dry wiki. But focusing so much on a story's facts eliminates that, boils down everything to its summary. What matters is not how Roxas resigning to his fate is conveyed, just the fact that he does resign to it. What matters is not what the series' emphasis on the power of friendship says thematically, it is that Sora keeps giving speeches about how his friends are his power, and that's not a very hard magic system, now is it? How does friendship give you power? Friendship is not a quantifiable unit of energy, that doesn't make sense. And it's cheesy, too. What is this, a kid's game? How cringe. As with analyses and Let's Plays and live streams, I have no problem with taking enjoyment in wikis, I have a problem with inflating their importance. When the artistry of music, blocking, set design, performance, scene writing, cinematography, and everything else is considered nothing more than style, while the wiki facts are seen as the substance, the work of art in question is eviscerated and our ability to appreciate its elements, even its imperfections, is destroyed. Of course, that can also cut off potential avenues of real criticism as well. The most technically coherent and tightly plotted film in the world is not saved by that plotting if the music is ill-fitting and the performances are flat and the camera is out of focus the whole time and none of that is intentional for the sake of some greater artistic point. But if a summary is seen as just as complete an experience as the work itself, it's easier to commodify, to transform from art into content, into a unit of information for mass proliferation. The literal is king, the metaphorical is worthless. But Kingdom Hearts operates primarily in the realm of the character, the thematic, the emotional, and the symbolic. Becoming a Heartless is described as succumbing to despair and negative emotions, and being a nobody is described as living without emotions and without human connection. One can interpret these as metaphors for depression, isolation, even addiction, in the case of Riku's arc with the power of darkness. And while a wiki could have a theme section that says this, it's a whole other thing to feel how these games convey them. I mean, it's show don't tell, right? The whole point of a story is to dramatize at least one idea, even a simple idea, usually more. Wikis are constitutionally built to exclusively tell, to undramatize. So no, I don't think Kingdom Hearts is confusing. I think a wiki approach to Kingdom Hearts makes it confusing. Kingdom Hearts is a story about how friendship is powerful and important, even in the face of darkness and cynicism. How growing up cannot mean casting friendship and hope aside, and how those who do so only end up yearning to get them back. I don't think that's terribly difficult to understand. Thanks for watching. If you feel so inclined, please do the like, comment, subscribe, and notification bell thing, and I guess also hyping is a thing now? Do you have to start calling for action for that too? Anyway, extra special thanks to my Patreon supporters. My Patreon has short bonus written essays, private Q&A videos, and script previews in addition to my deep gratitude. So if you'd like access to any of that and you can financially justify backing me, that would be greatly appreciated. Next time I think I'm going to try another in-depth critique of a single game, so stay tuned.